The word transcend means to come out of a trance.
Mm.
And so, what's been happening for me, and what I hope is going to happen for more and more people, is we come out of a trance around capitalism. We come out of a trance of there isn't enough to go around for everyone to have food and not be living in extreme poverty, not just in the United States, but in the world. I think it's time for us to come out of a trance of what we've been trained to believe, but isn't actually the truth of life itself.
Welcome back to We Be the Change. I'm your host, Colleen Akiko. And before we begin, just a heads up that I will be mentioning something at the end about a free community space I'm opening soon, a relaxed place to reconnect and restore and continue the conversation. Today, I'm joined by Leisa Peterson. She's a financial intuitive, a wealth coach, and author of The Money Catalyst and The Mindful Millionaire. Leisa's journey is marked by an unwavering commitment to personal growth. She's dedicated to transforming millions of lives through heightened financial consciousness, holding the conviction that abundance is an attainable reality for all. Recognized by Forbes as one of the pioneering 10 women driving growth in wealth management and investing, Leisa spearheads The Mindful Millionaire and Art of Abundance podcasts, and the Mindful Millionaire YouTube channel. And she also writes a compelling Substack blog called Equal Stake that speaks straight to the moment we're in now. In fact, we're going to dive straight into a post of hers titled, They Want Us Fighting Each Other Forever. Leisa's website is www.wealthclinic.com. You can also find other resources at SongRise.live. That's SONGRISE.LIVE. I feel delighted to have Leisa Peterson with me. We've known each other for years, and I'm so grateful that you're here with us. I resonate so much with what you've been writing, especially this past year. I couldn't not invite you to come and share, to not get too goopy about how much I admire you and how much of an inspiration you are to me. I felt prompted, Leisa, to reach out to you right away after I read a recent post. I don't even remember the name of the post, but it had at the top, They Want Us Fighting Each Other Forever. That post you wrote about being aware of patterns and taking a look at the structure of what's happening. There are so many quotable quotes in what you wrote. I don't know where to begin. It's just such a hurricane right now. I guess we dive in and swirl around and find our footing. And that's what you wrote about. And sometimes when we talk about it, we realize, oh, this is what's happening, but this is not who I am. What a relief.
So true. So true. Thank you so much, Colleen, for having me and for everyone listening. Yeah, I think that being in community, connecting with each other is really important, even when we don't have words or we don't know what to say. Like right now, I don't actually talk a lot of times with folks about this because I don't know where to start the conversation, because we don't necessarily know where everyone's coming at it from, and we don't want to add to the suffering or add to the burden that people may or may not be feeling at this time. And so perhaps it's really healthy for others to listen to this conversation, because we're both saying it's okay, it's safe to have this conversation. It's safe for us to go there. And just side note, as you know, I started my business 12 years ago when I was living in Truckee, and it came out of a desire to help people understand the conversations that weren't happening around money that I knew needed to happen, having been in the financial services business for more than 2 decades and wanting to help people become more empowered around money and all that money means in the society that we live in. But what's also interesting is all that I learned over starting my business still did not invite me or give me permission about almost a year and a half ago when I started writing about the things that we're going to be talking about. And it was so scary to me to open up this conversation because I felt like I was going to be perhaps upsetting people and causing people to feel discomfort. But I knew inside myself that I couldn't hold back. And so I've been writing on Substack for over a year now. And it's all coming from this place of like, okay, do the research, get educated about what's going on, don't be reactive, learn how to be responsive inside of this situation that I knew was wrong at my heart, but wanted to bring other people, if they were interested, along in that conversation. So that's a little backstory to like where I'm coming at all of this from. Not because I have all the answers, not because I know what we're supposed to do per se, but what I'm really interested in is how can we become better educated about what's going on, and even more important, how do we take good care of ourselves in the situations that we are learning about.
I love how you have a deep and holistic approach and way of seeing what we're going through. And the very principles that you started out with regarding money applies to everything. And that's a test of truth, isn't it? That it's not just for part of our lives, it applies to everything. You have traveled from one awkward spot to another in your conversations. And honestly, when I first started reading your posts on what was happening in our country and the leadership, I was kind of surprised the first time. But then as I read it, I'm like, well, of course, it's the same principles. We see another side of it, but it's the same principle. Could you talk about those basic principles to get us started?
Yeah. So the basic principle, the lens that I look at the society that we're living in is through this lens of scarcity and what's actually happening in a society that's one of the wealthiest societies in the world. We have more on average, like per capita, with the amount of money that's available to us, we're extremely wealthy. And yet we live in a society that throughout my life, including my own situation growing up, there was never enough. I was very scared about being okay. My parents had not a college education, like working class, and then they weren't very well educated about money, so they got into debt, and I became like the bill collector person that would call and be like, oh, they're not here. Like it was always running away and always scared of our situation. Well, because that was my roots, I probably paid a lot more attention to that, even though I got a college degree and then my MBA, and I went out and worked in more high-paying field of finance. I would always pay close attention to what's happening for people. How do they live? What is this massive poverty problem that we have in the United States? Like, what's going on here? Why is this happening? And so that was the lens that I think I've always looked at. But what was crazy to me is I think early on, I believed the narrative that, oh, people just need to work harder. Mm-hmm. And even though I knew racism is a problem, I didn't understand the ways, because these aren't things that were regularly taught in my MBA program. They didn't talk about economic disparities. That you just, unless you go down that rabbit hole, you don't learn about what's going on, especially if you live in your own little bubble, which would be for me a more upper middle class bubble. Mm-hmm. So the more I've learned through the research for my books, through talking to people, through paying attention, what I started to notice and what I've come to realize is that this is not just because of how hard somebody works. This is deep rooted from the beginning of the forming of the United States, like deeply rooted patterns of control and manipulation to benefit the haves, right? The ones who have the most. And so all these years, 12 years of helping people with their relationship with money, it kind of broke me, in all fairness, because in the beginning I thought, well, if people just became better educated about this, like we could make a big difference. I could actually help people. And yes, I've helped people, but I have done nothing to change the systemic issues that we face. Mm-hmm. And instead of it getting better every year, it's just getting worse and worse and worse, right?
Yes.
So this is the premise. And just to be clear, I also want to say this because I just said a lot, and one person could hear what I just said, and you would think that I am living in this place of deep suffering because I am so empathetic to others' conditions. And that is true that I'm empathetic, but simultaneous to all of this, for the past 26 years, I've been on a deeply spiritual journey of awakening. And we can even say enlightenment, if we look at the Eastern traditions. I've studied every major religion on the planet. I've sat at the feet of the most incredible teachers. Some are no longer alive. And I feel like I was supposed to meet them and study with them before they passed so that I could gain this incredible wisdom that would inform me of a completely different way of living my life than the traditional Christian or capitalistic model. So I'm both and. I understand capitalism. I do not think there's a problem in and of itself with money or making money or saving money or investing money. But I wanted to be able to look at all of this through the lens of spiritual understanding. And that's where I think the most interesting revelations have come. And my writing comes from the depth of that place too. It's like very practical, but then very, very spiritual, in that I'm looking to see, how do we transcend? And we hear this word, but we don't always know, what does that word mean?
Mm-hmm.
The word transcend means to come out of a trance. And so what's been happening for me, and what I hope is going to happen for more and more people, is we come out of a trance around capitalism. We come out of a trance of there isn't enough to go around for everyone to have food and not be living in extreme poverty, not just in the United States, but in the world. I think it's time for us to come out of a trance of what we've been trained to believe, but isn't actually the truth of life itself.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I was just thinking of this quote. I believe it's from Dr. Sandra Bloom, who studied for decades about how trauma moves through our systems. And she said, the real problems are denied, and therefore conflicts cannot be resolved. I'm wondering if all the teaching that you infused your heart and mind with in these 26 years, if they really served to dissolve the screaming illusions of our day, the stories that demand our attention, and we can't not see them. They're so blaring and so loud, and lately very foul. And we want to just cower away from them. And yet when we have that deep rootedness in what is real and true and unaffected by these illusions, then of course we're very humble because we know it's all a gift, and yet it may scream in our face and we can just blow it away like a dandelion to the wind. I don't say that in a proud way, but just that it's just not what's real. But if we haven't had that, at least a glimpse of awakening, it doesn't feel that way. It feels like we're really cornered. I just read part of a New York Times article a few minutes ago talking about the whole nation feeling shell-shocked, literally shell-shocked. We have a lot of trauma in our day-to-day, and we're tripping over it emotionally, but we don't know what we're tripping over, whether it's what's happening around us or whether it's kind of like sending off a tone that our inner tuning fork is just quivering to in terror, or both. When you were talking about your journey of coming to this awareness of what scarcity is and is not, right now there seems to be a scarcity of peace, of truth, a feeling of well-being. We're going through something pretty troubling. When we are in that knowing place where we have transcended what is false, then we realize, yeah, this is a really, really scary movie. I'm glad that I'm going to be walking out of the movie theater shortly because, boy, this is doing a number on my nervous system. I so appreciate the practicality that you spoke of, being able to communicate that. You're a wonderful communicator. And I printed out this post that you wrote, and I have highlighted quotes all over the place. I'm wondering if I could just shoot out some of these quotes and let you unpack them for us. There's so much here, Leisa.
Yeah.
It's really strong.
Let me add one thing before you dive into that, because I have a feeling it will provide greater context. I'm white, and I will just speak from a white woman's perspective of the United States, not others, because I don't think it's the same for everyone. But we have not been, and I will say forced, to live in paradox at the level that we are right now. And what is paradox? It's the both and. It's not either or.
Yeah.
And so I wrote a post today that's about the fact that we're in training. I feel like everyone's in training right now because we're going to be living in a world in the future that isn't the same as what we've had in the past. And we're going to need to be understanding of what it means to have paradox in lots of different situations and feel comfortable enough to not be frozen by paradox, which is a very high level of ability, or another way of saying it, a high level of consciousness to understand and navigate. Here's one example, to feel the fear and still keep moving forward, and not say that the fear needs to go away, because the fear is actually informing me. If I were to not be afraid, I wouldn't take action. So feeling a fear and taking action would be both and. I'm not saying my fear is wrong or bad, and I'm not saying action is wrong or bad. I'm going to do both, and it's okay. And so a lot of what I write, I think people sit with it for a while, or even this conversation, because it's hard to get our heads around what are we going to do next about all of this. So, okay, bring your questions.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that. And in fact, we could have podcasts on all your posts. They're so meaty and substantial. You talked about the both and paradox in the way of, I believe in unity, and I also believe in boundaries. And it is such a dance. I feel like in order to even engage in the dance, I have to take off my heavy coat and my heavy boots and all the stuff that's just going to drag me down into not being able to move, because we have to embody this fluidity in order to keep moving through this dark valley of the shadow that we are in right now. And I love that you are able to say, yes, we have this, and this is deeply true, and yet this is invisible. And here I am as an eternal being with physical feet walking through the mud. How am I not going to get stuck in the mud? And so it is this dance, it is a challenge, and yet we are getting stronger in the dance, or sometimes in the crawl.
Yeah.
And we're learning how to crawl better. I was talking with my cousin, Daniel Strawn. I interviewed him a while back on the podcast, and he almost doesn't even walk on the ground. He's just so elevated in his thinking and his understanding. And he talked about our energetically coming to a place where we can rise up into the next bandwidth that is our evolution. I'm like, yes, I'm with you, but how do I get through the end of the day? How do I have a conversation without either crying or getting upset or getting snippy? You know, this is the real day to day, and yet all the invisible is more true. So thank you for bringing up that paradox. It's where we're living.
Yeah. Yeah, the comment you said about unity and boundaries, right? I think in the past, at least speaking for myself, there's this thought of like, okay, I want to hang out with people who are like-minded people. And I think I used to believe that that meant like we share so many commonalities that of course we enjoy hanging out with each other. And what I've come to learn is that that can be a blessing and a curse, because in times when we're trying to come together, especially you get 300 and whatever, 48 million people in the United States and all these billions on the planet, like we're never going to come to that kind of agreement with each other. And so this idea that we can show up and unify with others does not mean that every single box needs to be checked that we're in agreement. We've got to be really good at placing a hierarchy of what are those top issues that we're all wanting to work towards. I think that's even more important than what we're running away from. Also, I'll say that. So, what do we want? And allows that to lead us, and then have boundaries of like, hey, these are things that it's okay that we don't agree on. That would be an example of we're going to always come up short if we think that we're going to find agreement. We can't even find agreement with our partners, much less, a stranger. And so it's learning about like, how do we operate from this place of working together, because any change that we want on the planet is not going to just be one person, right? This is the time of large groups of people working and learning how to work together.
Yeah. And a lot of the posts that you wrote that I'm referring to and that you always talk about is about kindness and compassion, taking care of each other, being thoughtful. And that comes from such a solid rooting in really experiencing that love for all the dark corners of our own selves. And when we realize, yes, it's safe to love, and that's who I am, then it doesn't feel so threatening to have a heart-to-heart conversation, or even just a pleasant conversation with someone that we know is in trauma. Scared people do scary things. Sometimes that comes out in the conversations, and sometimes behind our backs. But from that place of love, we can realize, oh, goodness, well, they've been really traumatized. We can care about that and not take it personal. And yet, we don't have to be spoon-fed abuse either. So,
yeah, we don't have to hang out with them. I'm learning this all the time because I always want to give people the benefit of the doubt. But then there come days where I'm like, wait a minute, I'm allowing this abuse to occur by even engaging in something where it's not going anywhere. I feel like we're having to look at those situations. We can love someone and we can also let them go. We can do both.
Yeah.
I also just want to mention that, but because this spiritual practice, when I say spiritual practice, what I am really saying is learning how to love more, learning how to love others more, learning how to love the essence of my being more, like learning how to be in this world with a loving heart, but not of it. And that is not an easy practice to learn if you haven't been focused on it up until this moment in time. And so if this is like new language to you, or you're thinking, I don't know if I've spent enough time on this thing called love, or meditating on love, or all things that I've been doing for 26 years, like, please, please, please give yourself grace of like, yes, love is who we all are at the core, but it takes nurturing and developing it over time. But it is a worthwhile goal to spend more and more time, especially in the face of what's going on, to have your meditations, for example, or your contemplative practice or your prayer to be like, help me understand love even more in my life.
Yeah. I love those two words, even more. They're so powerful. Even more. And love is so nourishing, isn't it? When we give ourselves permission to tune in to what genuinely feels good, what is life-giving, it seems to bring us to the next step. That first step can be so difficult and so daunting. But when we take that first step towards what we think is opening our hearts and learning at a below the surface level, it is scary, especially if it's new to us. I find it fascinating at the same time that learning something that seems like it's new and unfamiliar, when I step towards it and I come a little distance with it, I realize I'm not learning anything. I'm remembering something that is priceless. and beautiful.
Yes.
There's not much that tops that feeling in my book. Just, oh yeah, that's it. The reconnection. And part of us has never been disconnected, just discovering, rediscovering, remembering. So nourishing and strengthening. I find that your posts, your writing, your communicating, that's just what you spin off around you. And it helps those around you to do the same. Really appreciating that.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening. In part 2, Leisa and I get more practical. Nervous system care, fierce compassion, and what real strength looks like now. You can find Leisa at wealthclinic.com, and you can find other resources at SongRise.live. That's SongRise.live. I'm your WeBeTheChange host, Colleen Akiko. And one last note, I'm opening a Bowl of Light free community space soon. It's a relaxed place for restoration and real connection. I will share where to find it in the next episode's show notes. Until next time, may you step out of the trance and stay human, even if it seems the world has forgotten how. Aloha.